What's his name?
Conversation. But importantly, it's also a part of the regional and local conversation. I have fantastic local journalists in my patch on 3 Counties Radio and on Look East. And what's special is that if you have a local story that a local journalist has gone out to find, it can so quickly get onto the national stage because of our BBC. Would the Secretary of State assure me that in the forthcoming Charter Review, she will take very seriously the issue of local news coverage to make sure that that is protected and enhanced? Secretary of State.
I'm happy to give that assurance. We're looking both at the Charter process and how we can help to support and defend local news through the work that the BBC does, but also she will know that this government is developing a local news strategy to help our local newspapers to be able to survive and thrive in an era in which they face significant pressure. And she's absolutely right to say that this is not just about reflecting the whole nation, although that is an essential role that local news plays. It's also often the training ground for some of our most talented journalists who would otherwise not get those opportunities, and so we're determined to strengthen and protect it.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I would fight in the last ditch to prevent the BBC ceasing to be a public service broadcaster and to prevent it being broken up. Any large organisation can have bad actors who behave unethically, and that has happened on this occasion. But it does the BBC no service when people parrot the line that the person responsible for this crisis is not the idiot who tampered with Donald Trump's quote, but a former Tory spin doctor, one of 13 members of the board who allegedly influenced other members of the board to somehow provoke this present crisis. The crisis has nothing to do with Robbie Gibb. It has something to do with a mindset that on the front page of today's Guardian has the whole thing about Robbie Gibb and relegates the fact that $1 billion lawsuit may be taken out by Donald Trump against the BBC to a tiny paragraph at the end of the article on page 2. If you want to know what's wrong with some bits of the BBC, read the Guardian today.
Secretary of State.
I'm not, Madam Deputy, I'm not entirely sure how to respond to that, but I think the honourable member's views are now on the record.
Chris Kane.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've heard an awful lot today about the professionalism of the journalists at the BBC, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But there's less of them now than there was last year, and we hear that the BBC is in the fight of its life across a whole number of fronts. Well, when you're in a fight across multiple fronts, it seems odd to send some of your best fighters home, but that's what's happening to our journalists, where there are less of them in our newsrooms. Does she agree with me that journalism delivered free from fear or favour costs money, and it costs a lot of money to do it really, really well? So delivering that has to be at the centre of gravity for the BBC now and in the future, and how we protect journalism and resource it properly has to be at the heart of the Charter Review.
Secretary of State.
Yes, I agree with him, and can I assure him that that is very much central to the Charter Review process that we are about to begin. He's right to say that fearless and robust journalism costs money. It's essential that the BBC is fairly and sustainably resourced for years to come. As a government, we are keeping an open mind about how that may unfold. But what I have said, and I'm happy to repeat to this House today, is that we have ruled out funding the BBC through general taxation, because whilst it's absolutely essential that good journalism is well resourced, it is also absolutely essential that the BBC remains independent from government and is able to hold us to account without fear or favour.
Manuela Pertegala.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's essential that the BBC's independence and impartiality are upheld at all times. And I'm afraid there have been serious concerns raised about Sir Robbie Gibb's conduct on the BBC board, including alleged attempts to influence recruitment and editorial decisions. So if the Secretary of State cannot remove Gibb from the board and cannot end political appointments now, what actions can she take to restore public confidence in the BBC governance?
I would just start by saying that although everyone in this House is right to take with the utmost seriousness the failings that the BBC has accepted have happened over the course of this year. I would also just gently push back against the idea that the public has lost confidence in the BBC. It does remain the most trusted source of news in this country, and as I said earlier, in many parts of the world as well. In terms of the actions that I can take as the Secretary of State, I'm working very closely to support the Chairman of the Board through what are obviously tumultuous times. The Director General has agreed to stay on in order to see the organisation through that transition. We've already had discussions about the process for recruiting for a new Director General and the need to strengthen the work of the board and senior leadership when it comes to editorial oversight. That includes, as I said in answer to the Honourable Gentleman a moment ago, a discussion about the mix of skills and experience that is needed at the highest levels of the organisation.
Brash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Secretary of State's statement today because, of course, it's absolutely right to hold the BBC to the highest standard because that's actually the best way to defend our national broadcaster. But does she agree with me that it's not acceptable for members of this House who are paid by the BBC's commercial rivals, in fact, looking at the time, one of them's probably in makeup as we speak, to use their status as an MP to mount sustained and frenzied attacks that have only one aim, to destroy this British national institution?
Secretary of State.
Well, as I said to the House earlier, there is a difference between the absolutely legitimate and right and proper role of members of this House to raise serious concerns about the decisions that have been made at the BBC over recent months and the response to them. There is a difference between that and a sustained attack on an institution that has stood at the centre of public life for over a century and belongs to us all.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State very much for her answers in the statement. It has been clear over years that there's been a bias in the BBC. I have concerns over the last 12 months on at least 4 topics. BBC bias against Brexit, BBC bias against my party, the DUP, elected representatives back home in Northern Ireland who refused to engage with the BBC. BBC bias for Gaza against Israel. BBC bias against Free Iran government in exile, with the BBC promoting the son of a former dictator. My goodness me, it's quite unbelievable. 2 people have resigned, but the canker of it, editorial control, is still there. So, Secretary of State, the question I have today is just, when will it end? Is this just a pause, or is this the end? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Well, can I reassure him that, as somebody who has shared my frustrations with some of the failures at the BBC over the last 16 months and my frustrations about the response at times, that I have felt very much throughout this process that there is a recognition of the seriousness of this at the highest levels of the BBC. And in the conversations that I've had with senior leadership in the institution, there is also a discussion and a consideration.
All new Marvel Mix Mashers. You mix it, you mash it, you make it yours. Spider-Man mashed with Iron Man, flies with the repulsor hand. New Marvel Mix Mashers, each sold separately.
Welcome the statement from the Secretary of State, particularly her strong support for the BBC as an institution that belongs to us all. Does she agree with me that, as she noted, with the BBC regularly rated worldwide as one of the most trusted news sources globally, that a strong BBC not only acts as a bulwark locally and in this country against misinformation, but also across other parts of the world, critical parts of the world, where there are very few other trusted news sources, and that in delivering services to those parts of the world, those services must be properly funded as well.
Secretary of State.
I do agree with him, and it's not lost on anyone in this House that at a time when other countries who don't necessarily have the UK's best interests at heart are investing heavily in state-funded propaganda. It's essential that the BBC continues to be a light on the hill for people in times of darkness.
David Mundell.
I've long been a champion of the BBC as a UK national institution, but at the last Charter Review, I did raise my concerns about the prevalence of a metropolitan elite at the heart of the BBC, not just at UK level, but in Scotland, who don't always convey that they understand or indeed respect rural or older constituents like my own. So will the Secretary of State confirm that an outcome of this Charter Review will be that in order to preserve the BBC as a national institution, it will convey that understanding of people right across the UK, wherever they live?
I can and I will, and I do share his view that the story of the whole nation has to be told, and the best way to ensure that it is told is to ensure that all of us are involved in telling it, not just some. So when we look at the Charter Review, there will be a particular focus on our nations and regions. I've said previously that although I absolutely commend the work that the BBC has done, they've been leaders in this field.
I got me up against you myself. I should miss on the stream.